power in the upright could mean trouble on this full moon.
Call it a result of your poor decisions, naive actions you take towards your very own people, you cowards.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Kimberly ep11's Shattering the Illusion of False Power, where we use psychology-based patterns in order to study test subjects and report back different ways to stand in our power against narcissistic energy vampires, abusers, tyrants, sometimes menaces to society, who are opportunists that want to take you down for their come up, but they're also very flawed in their perceptions. When a narcissist comes after you and you feel like you have nobody to defend you, sometimes you have to defend yourself. And I created a 5-step framework in order to stand in my power at all costs and defend myself against narcissistic energy vampires, abusers, and opportunists who take advantage of me. Now, they are counting on my destruction and counting on my downfall, and I knew this and I understood this, so I developed the 5-step framework. This is Kimberly ep11's cookbook. The series is Shattering the Illusion of False Power, and even though I'm defending myself, I'm also teaching people who go through similar hardships to defend themselves. And the 5 steps are clapbacks, poetic justice, psychological warfare, self-sabotage, and comparison. Today we're going to look at the comparison stage in order to provide a performance assessment and review for somebody who would deem themselves to be an enemy or a rival, according to their words. I don't see anybody like that personally, but if somebody declares me to be their enemy, that's their words, not mine. Normally we use the comparison stage in order to look at the enemy's own doing, where they become so jealous and envious of you as a competitor or potential business rival that they start to do things that affect themselves, but in a negative way, and it's not good for them or anybody else on their team. So the performance assessment is going to highlight the enemy's weaknesses, highlight the enemy's solution to the potential problems that they face. And we're going to review the happiness, gratitude, and loyalty of the enemy's team. So what was the action plan? How were the results? Did the experience change the opinions of the enemy or even the opinions of their own team? If you could go back again and have a do-over, what would you do differently and how would you do it? So we need to review the actions, plans, and approaches to the enemy's tactics and decide how that benefits specific companies, communities, the team who work beneath them, and whether it generated productive solutions to the subject at hand, or if it produced chaos for the subject. Take a look at some of your enemy's weaknesses. I know for me personally, when I was ever in any job in any corporation, every single one of my managers had one thing in common. They needed to highlight my weaknesses and whisper my strengths or completely ignore them. In some cases, they might tell me on a day where I worked my ass off, "Hey, you did a really good job, kid." And I'm sure they'll actually mean their words. But let's highlight some weaknesses of the enemy. Providing an easy example. Okay, so one time I was at this company and I'm working my ass off. I got a million different things on my plate to get done. And I stopped to do this one specific thing. And my manager's standing there like he's the stand-up comedy man of the year, telling all kinds of jokes, and he's talking really fast. His eyes get really big. And I'm the one doing like all the manual labor as he instructs me. So what happened was I was putting products onto a skid and I needed to shrink wrap the products on the skid. And I kept building them up and he had an opinion on the way I did everything. But then the skid got to a certain point. It got really high. It was like way up here and I'm like, "Sir, I think we're gonna have to shrink wrap the skid now." And he said, "Oh no, you can fit this on there, you can fit that on there, you can fit that on there." And he talked about 1,000,000 miles a minute, and he just could not stop talking until I continued to stack the skid. So guess what happened when I overstacked the skid? All the products went flying out across the floor, and And he went, oh, boink. And he went, oh, okie dokie. And he thought it was hilarious, and he's sitting there laughing. And I said, boss, I told you the skid was going to fall apart. And he said, I know, that was my fault. And he acted like he really enjoyed that. But then guess who cleaned up the mess after? Not the guy who told me to overstack the skid. I cleaned up the mess. So I look at this as very poor leadership, and not only a weakness of my enemy if the company had a problem with me, but the weakness of the people they employ to become managers, who are supposed to be above me, but show themselves to be inferior and unproductive to the company's wellness. So that's one situation where we can highlight a weakness. Now, like I said, in any job opportunity where I was able to come into a company and create change for the better, I was always working my ass off, and I had a lot of creative, innovative, and hard-working ideas. And I did work very hard, but it's like every single person I had as a manager saw this and they became threatened by it. So they needed to point out all my weaknesses if they can find them. And if I had a lot of strengths, a lot of creativity, and a lot of potential, when I attempted to move up in rank at that specific company, they made sure they turned it away from me and they gave it to somebody else. Now, in this situation, I was a young guy. I was in my 20s, and they gave it to this really casual, like, just sort of slacking off, taking it easy type individual. So I was in my 20s. The other man was in his 50s. And it's not that we discriminate against age, or was it in this case, because I believe it was. I was the one who worked my ass off at the company doing all these different things. The older gentleman was the guy who just sort of took it easy in a different department. He didn't work very hard. And sometimes his work became my work because they had me going all over the place. But even when I did his work, the way I see it, I was superior to him doing his work at the present moment when it was outside of my job description, but I was a team player and I stepped in to get the job done. Because I just have to go where I'm being instructed according to my supervisor or manager. But what if the manager is not an asset to the company, but a weakness? So that's how we look at rival business partners, whether it's a company themselves, a CEO of one, or somebody beneath them that oversees people such as myself who work underneath both of them. But then that person they hired turns out to be inferior and makes the company look bad, and it costs the enemy different things in the company. So let's look at some of the company's investments based on the opinions and actions of people who are given positions to make these investments. And let's look at how it affected the company. Did you see an increase in profit, or did you see a decline? Were you investing in the opinion of somebody and losing money? Because if you say, hey, let's try this idea, and you invest in it and you lose money, that should be a strong indicator whether you have an ethical business practice or not. That if you're losing money for your investors, you're probably possessing a lot of weaknesses for the company, and it could cost you your job in severe cases. Imagine if you continued to make poor investments on a consistent basis and you never saw an increase. Like buying a stock and it never goes up. You just stay the same. But what if you get to the point where you have a pretty large checkbook, but all your investments are making the company go down? It's like, wow, we got to get rid of this person. If they don't step down today, I'm afraid for this company. I'm afraid for the future of this company. I don't know what's going to happen with it. They're costing us so much money. And then we look at the happiness, gratitude, and loyalty of the workers. The workers are probably taking the money to do whatever they're told to do, but they may not even agree with it or enjoy it. They may be smiling at their boss's face and talking shit about him behind their back. And I've seen this many times, even if people do that to me as well. So I told the story about the manager who showed his weakness to me, and when I did things his way, it caused a problem, made me look bad, made him look like a goof, and if anybody was overseeing that, it would make the company look very bad in that present moment. If they were observing our managers on the floor on that particular day. Because when a manager fucks up, I'm the one who has to clean it up, not the manager. He's just kind of standing there with his finger up his ass. He's not too funny. I think I'm a little more witty with my stand-up comedy, but at the end of the day, I did all the manual labor and he did nothing. So if I presented this information to that manager in that company, since they would call me a rival potentially if they had an issue with me, what would they go back and do differently if they could do things over again with the manager they hired? Would they still hire that specific individual for the job? Would they still have turned me away from a promotion or upgrade when I applied for a job, but they favored the other man because he was older than me? If they would go back and do things differently in that case, I'm sure they could learn and improve to benefit their company. But what if you have somebody who's stuck in ego, and now the ego is in competition with the future of the company, but the company is losing money due to the ego and opinions of one individual who calls the shots and says invest in this, invest in that, but all the investments cost the money. And nobody's seeing an increase on these investments. It's like the equivalent of having a guy in the stock exchange and he's trading stocks, but he's intentionally doing a piss poor job and making people lose money. And now even if the investors don't care what they're investing in, they're going to say we're losing so much money because we listened to this person, and they're like, wow, we listened to the wrong person. And then that's how you review the happiness, gratitude, and loyalty of the enemy's workers who are below them. But maybe the workers don't even agree with the enemy itself if they declare you to be a problem for them. But why would you be? So where I stand now is that everybody saw my potential in any company I was at, and they made sure that I couldn't move up. They made things very difficult and problematic for me, and they knew that if I would have stepped into a role for that company, how much I would have shined. And I don't do this to compete with them, make them jealous or envious, or make them feel threatened. If they try to one-up me and compete, those are their emotions. I was wishing them well. All I do is come in, I offer a solution, and I give my opinion. I'm respectful and friendly to everybody. I work my ass off. But then they mistake that for an opportunity to take advantage of me. And then it's like, okay, I didn't say too much. Misery loves company, and I'm going to let you do that. But I'm going to remember the next time somebody tries to do that again, and how I would react differently, much like I provided a performance assessment review regarding a company who declared me to be a problem when they had a shitty manager and they had a person above that manager making shitty decisions. So that's kind of just the performance assessment of our enemies. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Till next time, it's Kimmy Baby signing out.